Okay, so that's going. I'll go back to this. And is there anything else we need to do before we get going?
No, I don't think so. You can't hear my dog there, can you?
No, I can't hear dogs.
Okay, that's
Everything's
good.
good. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of keep a stopwatch on the 20 minutes. I was going to get like horns and stuff like that, drop the puck noises, but then
Get a hockey night in Canada thing to start it all up, or what?
yeah, yeah, maybe do that. We'll see how it might progress over time, and I'll do some fun things like that. But for now, it is what it is. You ready?
Cool.
Okay. All right. Hey, folks, and welcome to the first Tough Through Tender Critical Conversations podcast series. We're living in a time where division and disconnection in communities, it is an unhealthy. I'm going to start that one again.
That was my dog. Let me move.
Okay, no worries.
Bring my charger with me as well, just in case.
The dog should be fine.
She's bloody loud, she is. It's ridiculous.
All right, let's go for it. Hello, folks, and welcome to the first Tough Through Tender Critical Conversations podcast series. We're living in a time where division and disconnection in communities, it is an unhealthy level. Over the next few episodes, we aim to help people find connections with the stories told so that they can be inspired to incorporate more compassion in their lives to others and themselves and help to rebuild the spirit of community and connection. And in this episode, joining me is Danny Meyers. Danny, first of all, thanks for joining me, buddy. How are you?
I'm great, buddy. Always good to speak to you.
Always good to speak to you too. And I was thinking before we get into this, how I was going to introduce you. So I am going to introduce you like this. You're an ice hockey player. You're an ice hockey coach. You are an entrepreneur and the owner of the Ozone ice hockey rink in Bracknell in the United Kingdom. You're a father. You're a son. You're a brother too. And some other things that I'm sure I've missed that we're going to get into over the next 60 minutes. But have I missed anything out in those introductions?
I'm a husband.
A husband. Oh my God. Joanne's going to kill me. Kill me. You're a husband too. And so sorry for that. You have to apologize to Joanna. So you are all of these things. And I never use the word X, because I think that as as someone who used to play ice hockey player, I was going to say an X and I was going to rattle off your statistics. But I was listening to a recording or an interview you did with Dave Sims. And at the beginning of it, you said this thing and it really struck me. And you said to Dave, you said, hockey is in my core. And I was like, wow, this guy isn't an ex-ice hockey player. He lives and breathes all of it. And that's kind of where we want to get going over this next 60 minutes is I want to talk about you, growing up and how sport became part of your life in this first period that we're going to have, which is going to be talking about what life was like, before a transformation happened in your life. And I'm going to time it, Danny, 20 minutes, like an ice hockey period. And we're going to go now. And I'm just going to literally say, what was life like for you, Danny? And let's go for it. Let's go right from the beginning is how you grew up and where you grew up.
Yeah, so I was born in Ascot. And I believe I was around 9 months old and my parents emigrated to San Francisco. So we moved out there. It was at a time so this was in the 80s. So at a time where America was very, was like it, I guess like it is now, but even more so in the 80s, just a wonderful place to go and explore and find a new life and the whole American dream and whatnot. So my parents moved out there and we had a very settled life out there, but it was at a time when a lot of Mexican immigrants were coming over. They were really starting to clamp down with the amount of immigrants that were coming in at the time. And unfortunately, my parents couldn't get a green card. So inevitably, after about 18 months, we had to move back. My parents say that I had an American accent at the time when I moved back. And we ended up moving back to Bracknell when I was about 2.5. And then from Bracknell, we were there for about a year and a half, and we then moved to a village next to Bracknell called Crowthorne. So I know this area extremely well, and it's somewhere that I obviously grew up and spent a long time here. And then at the age of 4 years old, the Bracknell ice rink opened, and I went to the first ever Bracknell Bees ice hockey game. Now, going back in those years, there wasn't really any big football teams around. Reading weren't particularly a big football team, so therefore, sporting wise, for the town of Bracknell, there wasn't a whole lot for the community to really to feel passionate about. And so the ice rink opened, and all of a sudden it felt like the whole town had kind of congregated to the ice rink, and watched the first ever Bees game. And then after the game, obviously I must have enjoyed it, and my dad obviously must have enjoyed it, and he inquired afterwards whether they'd be starting a junior development, which at the time they hadn't. And so my dad said, well, if you are, I'd like to put my son's name down. And so they eventually did, and I was the first ever player to register at Bracknell.
Nice.
So at that time, obviously the sport was still new, and certainly new to the area. I was 4 years old, and the youngest age group was a U12 team. So I was considerably younger and smaller than everyone. And it's not like today where ice hockey equipment here for the players is easy to get. We would have to get everything sent over from Canada, or it would be hand me down. So my equipment was a lot bigger than me. So
do you have any pictures?
I'm sure there are some pictures. Yeah, I'm no doubt my parents have got them all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was the youngest player, by far, with regards to being on the team, and straight away I was very well looked after by those players and the parents. Just moving forward quickly with regards to Ozone Ice Rink, we have a number of people that have come to Ozone Ice Rink that were originally going to the Bracknell Ice Rink, and were there when I was kind of there when I was younger. And because I was so much smaller, everyone used to call me Little Danny. Well, I'm 6'3" now, but a lot of the people still call me Little Danny. So
that's cute.
I'm kind of like, I have grown up, guys. And I'm obviously taller than most of them as well, so it's quite ironic that they still call me Little Danny.
I won't call you Little Danny. I'm going to interrupt now because I'm really interested to know the what was the encouragement like that you were getting from your parents? Because your dad obviously sounds like a man who's going to be inquisitive about being able to help his son, in just making that ask about junior hockey. What kind of father is your dad? Like, I've met him, and I know that he's hands-on and just goes for things. I've met your mom as well. But what was it like in your early days? What do you remember about your parents, especially because they were immigrants, coming back? And I can relate to my parents being immigrants going to Canada, from Doncaster. So I'm interested to know what kind of household it was like when your parents are actually quite adventurous and I imagine strong-willed.
Yeah, I mean, the strong will came from both sides. My dad's originally from Hartlepool. His father was, and my grandfather, who sadly passed away, he was German and fought for Germany in World War II. And he settled in England after the war and married my grandmother, who was English. And they were from Hartlepool. So there's obviously some things that my grandfather instilled in my dad. The fact that he fought in the war for Germany, obviously at that time was forced to fight for Germany. And he settled in England. There's obviously a pretty tough background from where he grew up, and I think that kind of transferred over to my dad. I remember my granddad just being incredibly strong, just a really strong, like, big legs and whatnot. It was, he wasn't tall by any means, but incredibly strong man. And my dad was always like that as well, like, just even to this day. I mean, he had a huge involvement in building the rink, and he's lifting like lengths of timber, and I'm like, Dad, can you not do that? But he can't switch off.
No.
And so with my dad's background of coming up in Hartlepool, and he was like really good at a lot of sports. He was good at basketball. He was a very good runner. He was good at football. He played for Slough Town as well. And then my mum, her background is the Elephant and Castle. It's all East London, and you know, it's very much a classic East London family of working hard and a very family community. And so the where my makeup is partly from my dad and from my mum, and there's no doubt that the family background has transferred over to me. I remember my dad saying, he said to me I remember it was when I was playing juniors. I must have been about 6 years old, and I remember him talking about a player on our team, and he was talking in good spirits about him, and he said, yeah, he's a real grafter. And I remember the way that my dad said that, and I was kind of like, it really resonated with me. Like, I felt, and to this day I still do, that if you're a grafter, then then that's the epitome of being a good human being, that you graft, that you work. And then he would always say to me, whatever you put in, you get out. And so there was just kind of that message of always, listen, get your head down and you will get rewarded. It may not be straight away, but when others stop and you keep going, then that is going to be the difference on whether you're successful or not. And it was only, I have a sister, Carly, who's done incredibly well. She was a professional dancer. She's now her own entrepreneur and doing extremely well. And I guess the message was always, just get your head down and you work. And that has ultimately served both my sister and me very, very well.
Was there ever an or else?
I don't think there ever was an or else. To this day, there isn't. There was never an or else.
What does an or else look like? So when someone says graft, you got to how does that manifest itself in you? What's your vision of what grafting is? I know you talked about showing up and working hard, but what other elements of that? And then what would be
graft for me is overcoming your own insecurities. Graft is feeling like you can't go on and then just finding that extra effort. I saw a really good thing the other day. A gentleman, he's a football coach, and he was talking about his father and how much he admired his father. And he'd mentioned that his father was ill. And at the time, this guy, things weren't going well for his coaching team. And his dad said to him, "Are you going to quit?" And he went, "Yeah, I think so." And his dad said to him, "Well, don't quit for one more day." And so he did one more day, and then he spoke to his father the next day, and he said, "Well, just don't quit for one more day." And inevitably, he kind of worked through his problems and he was able to turn his own insecurities around and make the team successful, all because he just went, "No, let's just go one more day." And I suppose, as I kind of summarize what I think graft is being honest with yourself with regards to what your capabilities are, but also where you need to seek help. And graft isn't, I'm just going to power through things and whatnot. Graft is looking inside yourself and having some self-reflection. And at a time where you're kind of like, I don't know if I can do this, the effort isn't doing it. The effort is finding some support from yourself or from someone else. That's the graft. That's the no quit. That often people find themselves quitting things because they personally feel that there is no more help for them or they can't help themselves. The people that don't quit actually seek that extra help, and that's what pushes them over the line.
That's a really great explanation as a 39-year-old, that's in the position that you are, that's been through what you've been through. But I'm interested now, going back to Danny, the little Danny hockey player, and how you had those morals instilled on you to get to where you were in terms of the success in your ice hockey career. So what how did that evolve? How did you start to use those things that you learned about grafting and working hard, and how did it apply to your career as an ice hockey player, and then how did that evolve? Because like I know you started off in Bracknell, you've been to Basingstoke, Milton Keynes, and the pinnacles of Nottingham and Sheffield, and I think a little bit of time in Coventry before Nottingham, right?
Yeah, a
And
couple
then
of games there. Yeah.
yeah, and then back down to Guildford, where your playing career evolved. I'm not going to say it ended; it evolved. um, because I'm probably sure one day you're going to get on the ice and maybe we'll play some 3-on-3 and we'll call that competitive hockey. Okay. Although,
Yeah.
although I've just had my hip replaced, so you got to take it easy on me. But yeah, so what's young little Danny, the young man that's learning about grafting and also trying to enjoy sport?
Yeah, I mean, academically, I wasn't particularly good. I had friendship groups when I was younger in infant and primary school. I struggled to form friendship groups in secondary school, high school. Um, I think a mixture of I at the weekend was playing for England or playing for Great Britain, and then I was returning to school, which had no other ice hockey players, and that high of being with my teammates and obviously having something in common to then go into school where I struggled.
Hmm.
Um, I really struggled. I think one of the things as a sportsman is that you got to have that self confidence where from the ages of 13 to I would say maybe 20, battling that being confident and not being arrogant.
Hmm.
And I have found that I'm so focused and driven on what I do that some people A don't understand it or B think it's arrogance. And I think at times on self-reflection it was arrogance. I didn't know when to switch off from being the hockey player
Hmm.
because really that was the only thing that kind of gave me any self-worth and made me feel good about myself, because when I went to school academically I wasn't good, and I did struggle with academics. And so there came a point, I would say, when I was around 14, 15, where I just didn't switch off from Danny Meyers, the ice hockey player. And I think that made that hard for myself to make friends. It made it hard for people to want to be friends with me at school. And I think I tiptoed over the line of being confident and being arrogant. It was almost like, I remember the careers lady saying to me, "What do you want to do?" I'm like, "I'm going to be a hockey player." And she was like, "Oh, okay, but what else?" And I was like, "You're not getting this. I'm going to be a hockey player." And I would say the last 2 years of my school was a poor effort from me with regards to um, studying, but also friendship wise. I don't think I endeared myself to people, and that's certainly
How did that make you feel? Like when you have to get up and go to
extremely
school?
isolated. I mean, but before I kind of there was episodes of, I remember like someone spat in my hair and stuff like that, and I just listened. School just wasn't for me. I didn't fit in there. It was a lonely time. I I shudder when I think about school. I would never go to a school reunion. I know there's been some since at my school. I can't personally put myself through that. I think as we go on, you'll see that there's certainly some scars and some baggage that I still carry to this day that I need to talk and work my way through. Um, but on the hockey side, I was the best teammate ever, and I loved my teammates, and I loved being in the battle. I loved going into a game thinking this could go either way, and it's going to take a monumental effort from us all, and then getting that result at the end was just incredible.
What
Um,
made you such a good teammate?
because I was more concerned about being a better teammate than a better player. I always felt that you've got to be a good player to be on a team. You've got to be a great teammate to stay on a team.
Hmm.
Being a good teammate gives you longevity, and it gives you longevity after the game as well, because for all the relationships that I have now with my ex-teammates and actually guys that I never played with, but have been able to form a relationship through my teammates because they know that person. Not one of them say anything about my stats. Not one of them say anything about all the awards that I won. They base me on whether I'm a good person or not, on whether I was a good teammate. And so that being a good teammate far, far outlasts any longevity that any goal, assist, or trophy can ever have.
I was looking at your elite prospects, and the thing that popped out to me was the A's and the C's next to your name in Nottingham. And that to me, I'm like, you were a leader in Nottingham. You're a leader as a hockey player, but it's noted when you've got a letter on your chest. So what did that mean to you? And then can you further elaborate? What does being part of a team mean to you? And then what was it like to be one of the leaders of those teams?
Just on the captaincy, I've had at least an assistant captain on every team I've ever played on. I was captain of the England under-14s, Great Britain under-16s, Great Britain under-18s, Great Britain under-20s, the assistant captain for the senior team, captain in Nottingham, assistant captain in Sheffield, assistant captain in Guildford, assistant captain in Milton Keynes, assistant captain in Bracknell. It's a reward of a reward and a reminder that being a good teammate gets recognised, because I wasn't the best player at Nottingham, and there's this kind of stigma that whoever the captain of the team is the best player. It's like so far from that, and it's something that I try to instill in all the players of this generation here. But to be able to be part of something on the weekend meant more to me because I didn't feel like I was part of anything during the week. Like it was literally, and I know this is a cliche and whatnot, but maybe it's a cliche because it's true. Like it was my savior. I would just sit at school just dreaming about the weekend. I would sit and my legs would like kind of go up and down at school because I'm thinking about the game that was coming that weekend or whatever it may be. And one thing I always had as a player was I always backed myself, regardless of what level I was stepping up to or what players were joining a team or the obstacles in my way. I enjoyed the journey actually more than the destination. And I actually, even with the rink itself, there's days that I miss the build. I like being in the journey of it. The actual result actually doesn't mean as much to me as milestones on the journey going up. And again, kind of, I'm aware that there's some things that I need to make good with myself. And I wonder why that I get so much enjoyment out of the journey, but actually when I win and when I do stuff, it never actually hits right with me. It never actually kind of scratches the itch. And maybe that's because during your hockey career, you're always building. You do something, and then you're building for the next thing. You win a game on the Saturday, great. Well, you got to go again the next day, and then you get a 4-point weekend, and then right, we've got to do it next week. And so maybe that is my mindset that once I achieve something, I've got to move on to something else. And I do feel that I do feel there's at times some self-worth issues that I have with myself. That I always feel like I need to do something, and I struggle to at times feel proud of what I've done, and sometimes I completely forget what I've done. And you speak about elite prospects, and I know we've had this conversation before where in my office I refuse to have some photos of myself playing in my office, and you talk about elite prospects. Well, I've never been on elite prospects for myself. I've never looked at I have no idea what my stats are. I've never done it. And I don't know what it is. And it's something that I need to work on for sure. But the journey was always the best part for me.
And that's the Hooter sound. That's the sound of the first period coming to an end.
Can I have an ice cup?
Perfect. Yeah. What would you do between intermissions?
Come off, helmet, glove. Gloves would always get dried. So come off, pass my gloves over to the trainer, helmet off, body armor off, undo both skates, throw a chew in, take my stick,
Yeah.
sit there for a couple of minutes. Coach will come in, say what he had to say, skates back up, elbows, body armor, shirt, helmet, grab my stick, grab my gloves as they came out because they're now dry, and then last person onto the ice, and then
Beautiful. I
tap
love
the
it.
bar twice before it restarted.
I love the rituals of an ice hockey player. Bunch of weirdos.
Yeah.
um, so that was a great first 20 minutes of what it was like. And now we're going to start period two, and we're going to talk about what happened. And Danny, over this period, we can talk about your I suppose your career towards Guildford, and some of the things that I'll mention around some of the stuff I heard you talking to Dave Sims about. And we'll get into what happened, the big transformations in your life, and the times where you can be a bit vulnerable and so courageous. Because I know your story, and I'm never tired of hearing it. So let's start period two.
Cool. Let's go.
All right. So Danny, you Sheffield, you were playing in the elite league, and then there was a decision to be made about whether or not you were going to play there. And I think it was Jared Adams that was the coach and notified you that that they wouldn't need your services anymore. And that's when you had to make a pretty big decision in your life. And what was that like? What was it like knowing that your services were no longer needed? With the Sheffield Steelers.
To be honest, we kind of need to go back a little bit more, and the move from Nottingham to Sheffield. To this day, it has a pivotal point in my life, and certainly some scars for sure. I was captain in Nottingham for a long time. I'm the youngest, and I'm still the most successful captain. At the time, Nottingham, we really started to make a breakthrough. The Panthers had moved to a new arena, and the crowds were getting bigger, and the popularity of the team was huge, especially in the city of Nottingham. And it was a club that had never. When I got there, they hadn't won a playoffs in 18 years. They'd won a cup a couple of years before, but they'd only won 2 trophies in maybe 30 years. My first year, we won the playoffs. My second year, we won the cup. Then my second year, I was made assistant captain. My third year, I was made captain. We lost in the playoff final. And then for a succession, we were winning a lot of trophies. And there is emotional highs and emotional lows in Nottingham. And as the captain, I was kind of that spokesperson on behalf of my teammates, but at times my team. And Nottingham, it takes a certain person to be able to play in Nottingham and be successful there, because the pressure is so high. The highs are high and the lows are very, very low. And that club has swallowed up a lot of players over the years, very, very good players, and players that have played at a very, very high level across the world. Internally, I was battling with a member of staff there, and it got pretty toxic between him and I was fighting on behalf of the players and at times the fans, and inevitably it had to come to an end. And so I was released from Nottingham, not because of my playing performance, but because of my relationship with a staff member there. And that hurt me a lot, an awful lot, because for that time I was the Nottingham Panthers captain. Everyone knew me as that, and all of a sudden I wasn't. And so there was a little bit of an identity crisis. And at the time, my wife had just gone back to work. My oldest son, Joel, had just started school. And so we'd been living in Nottingham. And so there was a lot of offers for me to go to other clubs, but it would have meant moving. And I didn't want to unsettle the household. And so really what it came down to was either joining Coventry, which is a rival of Nottingham, or Sheffield, which is a bitter rival. You are essentially going from Manchester United to Liverpool. And so I made the decision to sign for Sheffield. And obviously, with that comes a lot of backlash. But people will never know the truth of what was going on, and they never will. I don't really see the point in going into it too much. Nowadays, whatever you say publicly, people will dissect and
Are you
they'll
talking
find a
about?
way.
Are you talking about some of the harms
Yeah,
that
so
maybe
I'm talking
people?
about, so the fans and stuff like that, the Nottingham fans will never really know the true story of what went on and what I was fighting for, and actually what lost me my job.
Mm,
Um, and I've had a lot of people ask about it, and I don't see the point in going into it. I don't think anyone will fully understand what I was trying, what I did for that team.
mm.
And
I think
inevitably, with me moving to Sheffield, that brought an enormous amount of backlash from the fans.
I think like I can feel you've got like I know you don't want to say anything because you don't want to throw anyone under the bus or kind of make yourself look out to be some kind of martyr. I know you were standing up for people. I know you were doing things, but there's like I can feel it in you. You like there's a lot of emotion behind what you're
Something
saying.
comes over me when I talk about Nottingham. It's
Yeah.
different. My eyes change, everything changes, and
You seem sad. You
yeah,
seem
it's very sad. It's sad for me. Um, it's sad for me because of everything that was achieved at the time that I was captain there. I don't have any. I don't know. I don't have any enjoyment out of it. Like none at all. None at all. And then going to Sheffield, and then what came with that afterwards, because I was still living in Nottingham. So it was extremely hard going, dropping my kids off at school. There'd be like scum written all over my car and stuff like that. Like I said to my parents, I was like, when I play for Sheffield in Nottingham, like you can't come to the games. I don't want my parents hearing the things that they were saying about me. I'm on the ice, and it was just horrific. And this is going back 2000, 2012. So yeah, over 10 years ago. I'm pleased that nowadays that there is more focus on abuse that sportsmen get, whether that be homosexuality, racism, whatever it may be. I'm pleased that there is a step forward. While there's an awful lot that still needs to be done, at least it's recognized that you just can't make those personal insults to people. And it
I
was 7,000 people,
mm,
I'll say 6.5, because it was 500 Sheffield fans that were like literally. I obviously I can't repeat the things that they were saying on this, but you come away going, man, like I gave my soul to that club. Like I played 4 months with a dislocated shoulder, and bear in mind, like the way that contract works in the UK is that you only get paid during the season. So in the off season, you don't get paid. So I was supposed to have surgery in December, and I decided to play through it with a dislocated shoulder. Like by the time I put my surgery off to the end of the season, which meant that I had to have surgery. I had to recover during the summer, which meant I couldn't work. When I went into surgery, I had my surgery. It ended up being 3 hours long. It was supposed to be 45 minutes, but the damage that I'd done in that 4 months. And I was in hospital for 5 days. And eventually, I saw the doctor's notes, and it said shoulder is grossly unstable. When shaking the patient's hand, his shoulder fell out. Like I played for 4 months like that. And because I wasn't able to work in the summer, I had to take a loan out to pay for my mortgage and everything. I was still paying that mortgage off, that loan off 3 years later. While I was playing for Sheffield, I was paying a loan off just so that I could play those 4 months for Nottingham. Now,
I
and
think
then
that
it's tough.
yeah.
It's tough to make peace with it all, and I haven't.
I think a lot of people, you're like you mentioned, you're playing in front of 7,000 people in Nottingham, but the salaries that ice hockey players get are not reflectant on those amount of people coming to watch. I mean, you don't have to divulge what you're saying or what you earned, sorry, but people need to know that professional ice hockey players, even if in the elite league, if you're the top of the top, you still have to have a second job. Like there's no way that you can be just a professional ice hockey player in the top league in the United Kingdom and just have the summer off. You need to be progressing to some kind of life after hockey. And I
Mm.
think a lot of people just don't understand that when they because so much media around sport in this country is around guys like Cristiano Ronaldo making $250,000 a week, and not understanding that some hockey players are making £250 a week. And that's a nice little pay packet to take. And then in the elite league, maybe getting up to around 750 to £1,000 a week, if you're lucky. So people just don't understand that, and then they don't understand the culture around ice hockey and what guys are taught at young ages to put their bodies through, because that's an intrinsic culture of being part of a team, which is something that you spoke about in the first
It's like
period.
you got to prove your worth, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't show any kind of weaknesses towards anybody, so you play through all these kind of pains because you want to be part of this team so much. Our innate need to connect to this team, and
That
and I
warrior,
think that,
it's like you got to prove that warrior mentality.
yeah, the things that your granddad taught your dad,
Mm.
right? Your dad taught you, and the thing that I know a lot of guys who play ice hockey are taught that from their parents. So, knowing all of this, not a lot of people who watch or follow ice hockey in this country are aware of those real strict cultural kind of codes, that hockey players are just taught play through injury. They're sitting in the stand and paying a ton of cash, and they can have their grievances, but they just don't understand, I suppose, the essence of an ice hockey player and the things, the morals,
No, and
and
obviously, and why would they? When you, regardless of what injury you have, when you're on the ice, you're expected to play like you're 100%. And the truth is, the
mm,
only time you're 100% during the season is the first day.
yeah,
And then it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and then by the end of it, you've got nothing left.
yeah.
But the Sheffield thing was actually, that was actually fine, to be honest with you. I mean, I'd spent 2 really good seasons in Sheffield, and I loved my time there. And Gerard Adams was a super coach, and we won the playoffs, and the playoffs were held in Nottingham. And basically, what had happened is G said, "Listen, I really want you back," and I said, "Okay, I just need a little bit of time on this because Joanna, my wife, who's from Wokingham, which is around here, she's." When we first moved up, she's like, "We are coming back, right?" I was like, "Yeah, yeah, well." And it was at a time when, truthfully, I kind of achieved everything. And it's a hockey player's life is very selfish, and you take your family around the world and whatnot, and it may not always be what they want; it's what you want. And so, um, an offer was made, and I decided that I was going to accept the offer with Sheffield. And but I had been speaking to other clubs at the time, and been speaking to Guildford, which is only 35 minutes from our hometown. And then that night, the Elite League announced that they were going to go up import levels, one every year. And I remember reading it, and then I walked out and I said, "Joanna, I'm going to be released tomorrow." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "I know what's coming here." I was the last Brit in the door in
Mm.
Sheffield. And they'd had a number of guys that had been there for a number of years, and they deserved to keep that spot more than I did, regardless of how good of a player I was. And it was the right thing to do. It was the right thing. And so the leaving Sheffield and how that all happened was actually, that sat with me absolutely fine. It was the right thing to do from the team. I knew what was coming. And Gerard called me the next day and said, "Listen, I don't know how to say this to you, but we're going to have to withdraw the contract because the import levels have changed." And I said, "Gee, it's fine. It's absolutely fine." And so I really look fondly back on my time with Sheffield, and I love going back there. And I've got nothing but good things to say about Sheffield. And and that opened the door to go to Guildford, which meant we were closer to home, and it also allowed me to start thinking about life after hockey. And the funny thing is, and my wife and I say this to each other a lot. Whenever I've moved from a club, or whenever something has happened, sometimes where it's forced me to make a decision or a life change, it's always worked out better.
Mm.
It always worked out better. And so I've kind of, when things are thrown my way now, I'm a little bit more resilient to it. And I'm a little bit like, okay, this is just the way it was supposed to go then. This is my path. Yeah, so we spent 3 years in Guildford, and I managed to build up my building business, and I also managed to start coaching young kids.
At the beginning, I forgot to say that you're a husband, and you mentioned Joanna now, and I'm interested to know that the fact that you did bring her around the country, and she wanted to know whether or not you guys were going to go home, and you ended up where you are now today. How important has that relationship been in the evolution of Danny, your relationship with your wife?
Oh, massively, because she had a different upbringing than I did. And so a lot like being in a hockey team where you get to learn other cultures from your other teammates. With my wife, I was able to see things a different way than what I had been brought up with, which is important to learn that there's other ways of how you can love and how you can care. And when we first met, so Joanna's 7 years older than me. And when we first met, she suffered with massive anxiety to the point where she couldn't even leave the house without being like really, really drunk.
Mm.
And I didn't know anything about anxiety at that time, panic attacks and whatnot, absolutely nothing about it. And it worked out well because at 20, because I didn't really think too much of it, our relationship worked, because when we were together, I just treated her normally and not as a victim. And so in that, she was able to find some confidence within herself. And part of that for me, I got to learn about, that people have internal struggles, and it actually helped us both. And, we just continue to work on things, and in the end, we were married with 2 kids, but we were both able to learn off each other. And I got to become a better person because I started to realize that a culture that I was in a hockey room where everything's fine and everything's macho isn't always the way of life. And maybe within that culture of being macho and whatnot in a dressing room, I was actually able to see signs of when guys were struggling. And that made me a better captain and a better teammate.
So as a captain, as a teammate, your career has now kind of come to the point where you're in Guildford, and what's next? Like coming to terms with maybe your playing career is going to be ending. What was that like? And not transitioning into some other avenue.
It actually happened pretty quickly. I'd planned on playing one more year in Guildford because they were playing a league below the Elite League, and then in January, Guildford announced that they would be moving up to the Elite League. There's no promotion or relegation, so you can apply to be in a league. And Guildford had applied to go into the Elite League, and I was like, I'm not going back up to the Elite League. It's a lot of time on the road. I'd been at the biggest 2 clubs. There was nothing for me to want to play in the Elite League again. I was physically done and emotionally done with the Elite League. And so when they announced that that's what they were doing, I actually, within like a week, I was like, okay, I'm going to retire at the end of this year. This is going to be me done. I'd already built up my building business anyway, so I was ready to I had something to move on to, so I would be fine. And then the last couple months were a bit of a blur. I didn't actually play very well in my last game. I wasn't sad at all after my last game. There was another guy that was retiring. He was crying, and I wasn't, and I was kind of like, wonder why I don't feel anything here. Like I don't feel anything. And so I carried on with my building business, and then I started coaching kids. And for the first 6 or 7 months, everything was fine. To be honest with you, I was enjoying life. I was enjoying having weekends to myself. Obviously, every weekend was taken away. I enjoyed being able to spend more time with my family at Christmas, because that's a very, very busy period for hockey players. There's a lot of games at that time, and everything was fine. And then slowly but surely, I just started to deteriorate a little bit with self-confidence and just general morale. And then I didn't notice it, and it kind of went on for a year and a half maybe, or something, where I was kind of, I knew I wasn't happy, but I mean, I didn't feel like, oh, I'm in a bad way here, I'm depressed. Maybe I was ignoring the signs. And then it just hit me, and then I was just in a bad way. And that was the start of the downfall, but that was also the start of the resurrection as well.
We'll get into the resurrection in a bit, but I'm interested to know the feelings of the downfall, because the whole purpose here, Danny, is to be vulnerable around your feelings, so that other people can identify with that. So I want to try to get into, how did your body feel when you started to, what were the signs, what were the things that you were recognizing with regards to, any physical manifestations of your depression, and then where you ended up in that driveway one day.
I put on a lot of weight, a lot of weight. I've never done any drugs in my life, and to this day, I've still never done any drugs. This wasn't something that I ever got into or was ever interested in. I've never been a heavy drinker, and even during that time, I wasn't drinking or anything like that. But I ate. I put on a lot of weight.
What was the eating doing for you?
The eating, at first, I didn't really notice it, and actually, I was comfort eating, and it felt pretty good. And then after a while, like I remember Joanna and I we went to Mallorca, and I'm not one for photos, or certainly selfies. I find that whole thing pretty tough. But Joanna was like, "Come on, let's have some photos together." And I remember, like, she took the photos and she kind of showed them to me. I was like, "Oh my God." And then when we got back, I went to a wedding of a buddy of mine, and there was some photos taken there, and I was like, this isn't good. This really, really isn't good at all. And anything with your diet can obviously, it affects your moods as well. It's astonishing how food can affect your mental health, and all those bad foods and processed foods and whatnot. And it just got to the point where I'd completely dismissed my whole hockey career. It was almost like I felt like I needed to act as if my hockey career didn't happen so I could move on to my next stage of my life. And within that, I just felt like, well, this is it now. I'm a builder, and there's nothing wrong with being a builder or anything, but I was just like, well, I guess this is it. This is me now. And I'm just going to be a overweight dad, and that's it. And there was just an enormous of self-worth, like no self-worth, no confidence. I then started to really struggle to be in a room with a lot of people, really, really struggle with it. And then, the building games, it's a tough game. It's tough. We were speaking about the weather earlier, and it was a nice day today, but a couple of days ago when it was pouring down with rain, and then I went to the rink the other day, and I walked out, and it was pouring with rain, and I actually did think, oh, I used to work in this. And the building games, it's a tough game with regards to trying to constantly get work, have that stress over your head of making sure that you've got work to have and then move on to, and you then have the financial worries. And then I felt like I was letting the family down because I was struggling to make ends meet. And I try I've got better at it, but I had assumed that the role of a father is to be a big, strong man who supports his family with finances, and I fell completely into that stigma, and I was failing on that part, which made me feel like I was a failure. And one night, I was driving home. It was about probably about 7:30. It was dark. It was raining. It was kind of in those February. It was February, and I'll tell you why it's February, because I'll move on in a bit. Um, and I was driving, and it was raining really heavy, and I was driving quite fast. And I remember driving, and I remember just thinking, you know what, I really couldn't care less if I drive off this road. I just couldn't take it or leave it. I was going to drive at that pace, and whatever came of it, came of it. If I got home safe, great. If I didn't, I just was like, I just don't care. I just don't care anymore. Like, maybe if I crash and I can get an insurance claim, that will solve all my financial problems. Like stupid stuff like that in my head, where I'm like, I've got to get out of this. And at a time where I felt like I just couldn't get out. And I eventually made it home, perfectly safe, no problems at all. So nothing happened. And I got onto the driveway and I just broke down. And broke down to the point where because I had opened the door because I was going to go into the house, and I was, oh, Christ, like, I've got to go into the house. The kids are going to be pleased to see me, and I've got to put on this front that I'm okay. Something could happen at work. Financially, something could happen. Something had gone wrong. And I was like, I've got to tell Joanna that actually we're not going to get paid this week. And I was thinking, how am I going to walk into this house? And I'd opened the door, and I was like, and I just started bawling to the point where I was uncontrollably sobbing and kind of fell out of the van. And I was just laying like hands and knees on the driveway, just like howling to the point where it was so loud, like Joanna came out. And it was a sort of crying that would suggest that something major had happened, like a death of a family member, that kind of uncontrollable bawling. And she came over and she tried to pick, and she couldn't pick me up. And I couldn't pick myself up. I was like just a dead weight. And she was like, what's the matter? What's the matter? What's the matter? And I just kept screaming, like, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And she eventually got me in the house, and I slept from 8 o'clock all the way through to 11 the next day. And she didn't wake me up for work. And like the next day, she was like, okay, we got to stop this now. And that wasn't the point of the resurrection, because that was the first step. Because there are numerous steps that you need to get to before you are in a position where you feel mentally better. So that was the first step.
And that's where we'll end the second period. that was a long second period.
Nice.
But let's have a period break. Shake it all off. It's pretty heavy, buddy. I mean, like you've told me that a couple of times, and man, I feel you on that driveway. You know, those tears coming out where you just like, I just don't know anymore. You know?
Yeah, I just don't. I have fucking no idea how to put one step forward.
Yeah. Well, on that, let's do it. Let's start at our third period. We're probably going to need some overtime and maybe a shootout.
Whatever gets them in.
Let's go from that moment of surrender to where you are today. Danny, let's talk about that. You took your first moment in those driveways, your first step, and what have things been like for you now since that moment in that driveway? What happened?
That was a big part of my life, a really good part of my life. The hitting the rock bottom was, on reflection now, a good part of my life, proud part of my life, that I just had enough of feeling this way and was willing to work on myself and work with others. That was one of my best days as I look at it now. Because if I hadn't have had that day, then maybe that drive home gets, maybe I do another drive home in the rain. You know, so what was a really low point was really a good day. It was a good day. And what kind of happened from there is when you realize you're in where you are, then there's a moment of actually then beating yourself up about it. You know, like you do the surrender, but you beat yourself up about it that you've got to that point. And that now you're fully aware that you are unwell and that there are problems. And so the recovery isn't quick at all. But what you don't realize is the recovery is actually happening. Because it doesn't, next day you're not, everything's just fine. It's not that. That's not how it's done. And you know, day by day, I kind of got through the rest of the week and had some time to myself at the weekends and whatnot. And what it did do is that by saying to Joanna, I need help, it allowed her then to put a plan in action and actually rally support for me and actually, you know, confide within my family members and some of my friends that I was in a bad way, which now kind of gives the green light for people to go, okay, now I can help you. Whereas before it was no one could because I wouldn't allow. And so their work actually goes on without you knowing on that bit. This is where all your close family and friends that want the best for you and love for you actually start kind of putting the plan together to put you back on your feet while you are still kind of laying on the floor. And one of the things that Joanna would often say to me was, when I started coaching kids at under 9 level, I was offered 2 professional jobs and I turned them down because I thought, well, I might as well play if I'm going to be away. But I didn't want to be away and I want to be there for my kids. And I used to train them on a Tuesday at 5:45 and I used to train them on a Sunday at 6 a.m. And she just noticed this kind of, there was an hour before, there was the practice and there was an hour afterwards where I was at my happiest and I was smiling. And so she says to me, you are a hockey player and you are born to coach and you are at your best when you're around these kids. I think you should build an ice rink. I was like, for the love of God, Joanna, just this, you got to come up with something better to make me feel better. This is just ludicrous. An ice rink. How? Like, forget it. So she tried again a week later and she brought it up again. And I was like, Joanna, like, I don't think you quite understand like what needs to be done. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't understand that she believed I could do it. I didn't understand. I was the one who didn't understand because I had no belief or confidence in myself, but she still saw it in me. Yeah. So then she asked for the 3rd time. And the 3rd time she said, look, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just design an ice rink and design how you would coach and what you could do just to take your mind off what's going on right now? It'd be a distraction for you. So I was like, all right, fine. So what I didn't realize is that she was going to work on it as well. And so like during the day, like I'll be building and I'll be thinking about this rink. And like straight away, like I just kind of like felt better. I started being creative and I started thinking about things. And then I'd come home and she's like, oh, I worked on this. And I was like, huh, well, that's cool. And then kind of every little kind of bit of the jigsaw started coming together. And then I was kind of like, well, all right, so this could work, but how do you fund an ice rink? And as I started going through all the stuff that I wanted to do, which was not actually coach a team, but it was actually coach players, I started thinking, well, actually, I don't need a full-size ice rink here. So all of a sudden, you go into 1/6 of what an actual ice rink would be. And then I started going through, well, okay, why do ice rinks struggle here? And what are the economic reasons behind this? And I then got my friend Kevin Fong involved, and he started taking a look at it. And he has an engineering background and works in oil. And he started taking a look at this, and he's like, hey, I think this could actually work, you know. And we started kind of going through it, and then it just it went and it went and it went, and then we're like, okay, I think we can do this. So then you go into the next stage of how do you do it, and it's funny because when we were doing this, it was lockdown. When I was crying on the driveway, my sister came and she called me, and she's obviously very worried about me. She said, "Come on, let's go for a drink, or go to the pub." So I met her at the pub, and it was a very emotional meeting between us. And she said, "What's your hope?" And I said, "Carly, I have no hope." And she broke down in tears hearing me say that. Her big brother say that. I said, "I have no hope." And she said, "Well, how can this be solved?" Now, what I'm about to say, I'm sorry. I don't think it was me, but it could have been me. I said to her, this is in February, I said to her, "I wish the world would stop for a month." And then 2 weeks later, we all went into lockdown.
Oof.
Mad, eh?
Yeah, mad.
And that gave me the time to design and build Ozone. And it gave me time off from building.
Mm.
So I stepped away from building for 3 weeks. So I had that stop there, the pain. And then I had time to design an ice rink. So I'm sorry for causing lockdowns, everyone.
It was all your fault. And now you've built this ice rink. I've been down to it a couple of times, and I'm very interested to know your ideas around the ethos behind it. I know you said you wanted to train players, and I know it's grown. You've got figure skaters there, you've got public skating there, you've got schools coming in, you've got a community being built around there. How important has that been for you, apart from working with the elite guys? But I've seen some of them come in and train during the summer, but and all the equipment that you've got. How important has the building of the community? Were you expecting that? Were you expecting you to build a community hub?
I was expecting to build a community hub because that's what I wanted. And I reflected back to the community that I had when I first went to Bracknell Ice Rink. And I wanted to replicate that as much as possible. When I done my business plan, it was, for the most part, all about hockey. And it kind of evolved a little bit more where we started doing figure skating and whatnot, and the public skates. What has been huge highlights for me is we hold the Blind Society here. We have the Deaf Society here. We have the special needs education kids here. We have Paralympians here. There are those things which I didn't have in my business plan. To be privy to those moments when there was one time I walked through the double doors and I was just walking past the rink, and there was a lady crying, and the Blind Society were on the ice, and I was like, obviously straight away something's wrong. And so kind of went up to the lady and said, "Is everything okay?" And she was like, "Yeah, everything's great." And I was like, "Okay, is there anything I can do for you?" She was like, "No." I said, "Why are you crying?" She was like, "That's my son out there. He was blind and he was skating around." And she was like, "This is the first time I've seen my son look like a normal child." Man, like, you can't put that in a business plan. You are privy to the amount of moments that I've been privy to, whether it be a kid score their first goal at Ozone or even a kid touch the puck. Because we do B tournaments as well, like for the kids that don't get a whole lot of ice time. There's been an enormous amount of people who've learned to skate for the first time at our rink. To be able to have that the same way with what Bracknell's done for me is just incredible. And so what Ozone is because it's not a club where we invite members from all over the country to come, it's now become a community because it's now a place where hockey side kids turn up at our rink and they're not even on the ice and they just want to come and watch the other kids and their friends are there and their friendship group's gone through the roof. And it's the same for the parents. The coolest part of our rink, arguably, is actually our bar, because that's where everyone sits and talks. I love looking up there and seeing all the parents talking to each other. And then on top of that, there are times as the rink go as I walk through the rink and something will be on, and there are moments that weren't put in the business plan that are incredibly special, and that is what it's all about.
Seems to me, Danny, like and I think that you'd be okay with this word, the word healing. And I think that you're on a journey of healing. It's almost like it's coming full circle from the time where you felt really connected as a young kid, as being a little Danny, to, you know, going through this cycle of being a you know, a husband and a father and a professional hockey player and a captain and an assistant captain, to becoming a coach, and along the line, maybe losing a bit of your away with the things that happened as a professional hockey player in Nottingham, where, like you mentioned, you lost the ability to feel, you know, and I'm wondering where you are now in terms of your healing. Because when I say I don't say I've healed. I say I had to go through a healing, and mine was asking for help too. I had a protocol. It was a 12-step program in recovery. It was really easy to follow. It doesn't seem like you had a blueprint. I know you talk about business plans, but, you know, in terms of business, but you haven't had a blueprint in your healing. It's like you've kind of embarked on this with the guidance of your wife and the love of your wife, you know, to fulfilling purpose, but there's nobody along the lines telling you what to do along the way. How has that been? How, like, where you kind of, you now know that the driveway was your rock bottom, but you didn't know it then. You now are most proud of that moment, like I am with mine, asking someone for help. I'm more proud of that day than any other day in my life, because I admitted complete defeat and I said, help me to somebody. So yours has been this healing process that no one's really kind of said, here, follow this program and you'll heal. You found it on your own, and with the guidance of the people around you. And I will say again, particularly your wife, because I mean, I can almost feel that love of her trying to pick. Oh, I want to cry, dude. Her trying to pick you up off that the driveway, you know. So, yeah, tell us about the healing process and the bits that you see and feel along the way.
I think some of it is not only looking out for signs for myself, but looking out for signs for others as well. And so I can learn off other people. I can learn, you know, what their signs are and what they're going through, and then I can reflect back on myself and go, okay, how do I feel about things? You know, if a kid, to be honest with you, a lot of it I learned through the kids. I learned so much from teaching these kids and how they react to things, because I really, as much as I'm coaching them hockey skills, I'm coaching them life lessons as well. And so I just draw just an immense kind of inspiration from a lot of these kids, where, you know, when they're on the ice, they're asking for help, and I help them, and I know the feeling of being able to help someone makes me feel good. And so why should I deny that from someone else if they want to help me? And so there hasn't necessarily been a blueprint, but what it's been is a consistency of the blueprint in my head. Is it's always okay to reach out, and listening is good, and I'm done with all stigmas of man up. I just don't care for it. I really don't. And I'm very, you know, like what I said kind of earlier on the interview, like I've always backed myself. Like I'm fine with this interview. I'm fine with saying this stuff. Like I walk away happy after all of this. I enjoy talking about it, you know, and I'm very secure in the fact that I now don't have to live up to anyone's expectations of what a man should be, or actually what Danny Myers should be, to be honest with you. Like, I like me. I like all the insecurities about me. I like the fact that I like the journey. So I still like figuring stuff out about myself. Still feel like I actually am at my best sometimes when I'm most vulnerable. I feel like that's when I get most creative. It's when I get most inspired from it. And so I've done a pretty decent job of being honest with myself. And I think that's where it starts. And if you can be honest with yourself and then be mindful of the fact that, you know what, tomorrow might not be a great day, but it's just tomorrow. And I accept the journey of life, that not everything's going to be great. And then sometimes stuff's going to happen, and something's going to happen that is out of your control. And maybe you really, really don't deserve it. 2 weeks ago, our electric went out we had an electric cut, and the rink went down for a day. And it was on a Sunday. Public skates were sold out. We had 4 birthday parties. And I was like, oh my God. And then I just kind of like, you know what? Like, it's just an electrical cut, Danny. Before, I wouldn't have been able to, back when I was building, if something bad like happened, when I was building something like that happened, I would have just completely lost my mind. I'd be like, the world is against me.
What you've outlined is this process that I've been able to identify with your story is like the feel that, the year and a half before the driveway where you were starting to put on weight, you were becoming aware that something wasn't sitting right with you. Then there was that acceptance when you were on your driveway. And then there's this ability, I believe, to reach out for help. As you say, we're designed to reach out for help, and there is that duality to it. By me asking for help, I'm actually helping someone else
Yeah.
fulfill their purpose. So don't
Yeah.
ever be afraid to ask for help. And then to have these moments where you have the tools now to be able to deal with life's challenges, because their life is going to be like this all of the time. It's never plain sailing, but we have the tools to be able to go sit back and say, hey, it is just an electrical cut, or hey, this is just something that's happening, and it will pass. But how am I going to handle it with dignity and respect, and not getting those crippling anxieties and fears that I normally had, or
And
having,
not
for
taking it
me,
out on others as well.
not taking it out on others, not having to use food or substances to cope with it. And I'm really now interested with, as we get to the end of the third period, the old ideas that you had around manning up, and this idea of what real men should be. And if someone said to me, what's a real man today? I don't have a definition.
No.
All I know is that I want to be compassionate, loving, vulnerable, courageous. I want to be of service and help people, because as you said, it fills me to be able to help somebody. And these ideas around pull yourself up by your bootstraps, suck it up, don't be a wussy, using homophobic slurs to describe somebody in a changing room. How do you now help people unlearn this language and these old cultural ideas that were so embedded, not just in ice hockey, but in all sport, and also corporate culture and world coach culture, that everyone's taught? You have to sort out all your own problems. Reaching out for help is a sign of weakness. How are you, with your community? How are you unlearning some of these old ideas?
I think it's just leading by example, really, isn't it? I called you about 6 months ago. I had an episode, and I called you, and I said, Nick, I'm in a bad way. And you're like, okay, let's breathe together. I told people that I reached out to you. I said that I seeked help. I had a bad morning, and I was struggling to breathe, and I called you and I said, Nick, can you help me? And you helped me, and I felt better that day, and I've got no problems with telling people that, yeah, I called Nick. I was in a bad way, and Nick really helped me. So there's no better way to teach or lead, by other than being an example of what can be done. People need to see it. People need to hear it. And they need to see evidence that you are doing it as well, as opposed to someone that's just saying, you should do this. Oh, okay. Do you do it? No, I don't. You know, It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. When I coach the kids on the ice, I say to them, I will be the hardest working person on this ice. And so you got to be as well. Because if I'm out there being lazy, then they'll be lazy as well. I always got told that attitude reflects leadership. The attitude of the leader reflects the attitude of the team. So you lead by example. And so, we do it a lot with our hockey camps, and I do it a lot with the players that I train in the summer, and I reach out to them, or I call them and I ask them, how are you? I don't ask how the hockey is. I say, how are you? How are you feeling about things? Because I know the emotional, a lot of the young pros that I coach that are at the start of their career, and it's, what it's like, they might be getting a shift here or a shift there, and they've been used to being the top dog, and now they're playing pro and not getting as many minutes, and that's when the self-doubt comes in. They don't really want to hear about how to toe drag anyone or beat someone one-on-one. They want support mentally of how to get through this. And so leading by example is kind of the chalice that I kind of carry around with me and say, I have my days. And so it's okay for you to have your days. And there may be a time where I lean on you, and there'll be times where you lean on me, and that's okay.
And there's the sound for the third period. That's the end of the game. But I think I've got an overtime. Hold on a second.
Love it.
Okay, so let's hit into a little bit of an overtime. Danny, you've had an amazing what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. But there's a couple of things that you mentioned, and I think I referenced it once, but this ability, your whole thing around not feeling around your period at Nottingham and not having memorabilia in your office and around you. Is this something that you are, is there something that's still blocking, a block within you with regards to what was, 10 years ago? Is it 10 years ago? Almost 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
This period in your life, is there still a block in you that you want to come to terms with, or is it something that you're just done with?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. There are parts of me that I don't understand. There's parts of me that I really don't know, Nick. And I don't know I don't know what the right answer is. That's my confusion. Should I be dealing with this? Or is this something that, I finish it. I can't figure that out yet. I really can't. It doesn't affect me in my day-to-day life. When we speak about it, it obviously changes my demeanor. I think there are parts of it that does affect my day-to-day life, in a sense that, like, I don't like, for instance, Ozone, I am the face of Ozone. But I don't like photos of me being put out on social media advertising Ozone. Because although I know I should do it, because I need to promote the brand, and I know that everything I do at the rink stands up to me being in a position where the brand can be possibly made about me. Two things stop me. Firstly, as a hockey player, you never put yourself before the team, right? Mm-hmm. Secondly, actually, there's probably three things. As I've delved into kind of mental health and entrepreneurship, there's imposter syndrome. I think I suffer with imposter syndrome sometimes. Even though everything backs up what I do, even though deep down I know everything I do on the ice, I don't believe anyone else can do when coaching these kids and coach at the level that I do. There's still a bit of an imposter syndrome where you kind of like, what if people find out? But what are they finding out? I guess me even talking about this now is helping me. And then I wonder if I start putting, like I don't have anything around the rink of me, and I purposely didn't. When really, I'm trying to inspire kids to play for Great Britain and play in the top league and elite league, and they like to see it visually. People like to talk to me about my career. The kids love asking me about stuff, and the young professionals that I'm coaching at the moment, they ask me about Nottingham and what was it like when you went to Great Britain? What was it like at this, that, and the other? What was it like when you played against this guy? And they want to know, and I don't feel comfortable telling them.
How tall are you in skates?
6'4", 6'5".
6'4", 6'5". Big man. And you told me that you gave it your all at Nottingham. You left it all on the ice. You played busted up, right? Now, little Danny, playing him, watching his heroes in Bracknell, okay? You're little Danny, and you're watching 6'5", big Danny Meyers bust himself around the ice and stuff. What does that little Danny see in that man?
Well, the funny thing is that when I used to watch the Bees, I remember Sheffield Steelers came down and they brought 15 coach loads of fans. And Nottingham, when they used to come down, they used to bring just as many. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, imagine being able to play for Nottingham, Sheffield. And I play for both. And I captain and assistant both.
So you're coming off the ice with your seat on and you're busted up. And little Danny, the fan, sees you coming off the ice in Bracknell, looks up at big, like straining your neck, and you've just busted. What would little Danny say if he could to that man?
He did it. You did it. Oh, Nick. That one hit me right in the heart. Yeah, you did it.
You did it. You've done it. And you've done what not a lot of men could do, buddy. And little Danny, your sons, me, so proud of you. What?
Yeah,
and that's the thing, buddy, is I'm seeing you in that Nottingham Panther jersey, busted up. I've seen you come off that ice when I was covering it TV. You're a big man, sweaty and tired. You left it all there, man.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you did it. And all I know is, and this is the journey of you getting there, is the pride around that. The pride that I feel for you.
And I don't know if it's just it's letting go of the trauma and allowing the acclaim to come in.
Little Danny doesn't see the trauma, right?
Yeah.
Big Danny sees it. Now you got to think about what old Danny wants to do, to grab you both by the hand.
Yeah.
And say, yeah, let's go down this road together and put some pictures up.
Yeah, it's almost doing a full cycle again, isn't it? And just coming back to that innocence of it all and letting go of the baggage.
The love, man. Letting go and let go of that trauma and bring in that love that little Danny sees. And buddy, it pushes it out of the way, right? There's that hole that's filled with the resentment and the stuff that happened. And then there's little Danny ready to say, I love you. Thank you for playing for us. Not all the BS that you heard, but the love of that child.
So last week I got named the Great Britain under 16 3-on-3 Youth Olympic coach. And And there's stuff like that that, you know, I'll be taking a team to the Youth Olympics. The kids will stay in the Olympic Village. You know, we meet at Heathrow, and all the athletes get on the plane, and I'll be taking a team there. And it's, you know, in all of this, I mean, the fact that I've even built a rink, which no one else has done, and you know, this taking a team to the Olympics and whatnot. I just got to find a way of appreciating that and enjoying that moment. And I think that probably starts with letting stuff go. I think that's probably the best thing for me to start doing. The way that I tell other people to let go. Sometimes you don't ever take your own advice, do you? I suppose, and you're the one that's saying it out loud to people, but you're not the one listening to it.
Oh, dude, I mean, I'm sitting here saying let go, and I've got things to let go of too. You know, I
Yeah.
carry around the need to control, the need to have everything the way I want it, just for my own safety, because I feel insecure around certain things, and I keep saying to myself, let go. And I think it's in those moments where you can sit, take a breath, and it just gets easier and easier and easier each time you do it. And like you said, none of this stuff happens overnight. This is a process. It's a lifelong process of just becoming human, you know, and forgetting all of the stuff to remember that we're humans having this. Well, we're humans on this planet together. And there's just over 8 billion of us now, you know. And what are we here for? We're here we're designed to help one another, not take from one another.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that that's what you do. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the journey that you're on. I'm so grateful that you could join us today. That over time is, I don't think we need a penalty shootout, because I'm probably going to go cry from some of this stuff.
We'll go straight to the man of the match.
Well, you get the man of the match, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate it, bud.
Yeah, thanks for joining me, bud. And I'm hoping to see you sometime soon, and we'll have a good catch up. Okay.
That's good. Thanks, buddy.
All right, brother.
Bye.
Let me just do